And now we're going to prep it up to put the firewall on. On the firewall, there's 3 holes. The outer holes are going to have dowels go through it. They're going to glue into the wing. The center hole is for mounting a pointer. And what that's going to be used for is setting the center line. So you just want to put a piece of 1/8 inch dowel in there, and you'll have a longer piece because we'll need to cut that length, which I already have on this one here. And then just take a triangle or something, and just make sure that it's square both directions. There we go. Because what we're going to do is this is going to go in there and get set up the center line. Now to set the center line, I've already done here, is you're going to measure up 6 inches from the root right here on each side and put a pin. And then stretch a string. In this case I've used some dental floss, which somebody suggested works pretty good. I'm going to stretch a string in between those 2 pins. That's going to set our center line this way. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take, mark the center, the absolute center of the airplane, or the wing, and then taking a straight edge, this is where it's critical to be as accurate as you can, those 2 marks, and then taking a Sharpie, we're going to put a mark right there where it crosses. So that little mark should be the absolute center of our thrust line of our wing. So now we're going to test fit the firewall. The firewall is going to fit right in here, and it should fit pretty good. And what you might do is just draw your little center line mark right there, because when it goes in there it's going to set pretty flush. And then test fit it. It should point right there at that dot. Okay. If there's a little bit of a ridge down here in the center section here, just make sure to cut it off so it's flush and it's flat. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to glue it on, and we're going to use epoxy to glue it on. I happen to have a couple of small clamps here which I'm going to use to hold it in place. Once I put those on, so that'll hold it. With a 5-minute epoxy you can sort of just hold it in place by your hands. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to glue in the firewall. Okay, next we're going to glue the firewall on with some 5-minute epoxy. Just put the two mixed parts of the 5-minute epoxy in here, and we're just going to mix it up real good. Make sure to mix up enough. On this pointer on the front of this firewall, I forgot to point out, you need to cut it because it's going to be longer. Make sure to cut it so it fits. When you put that, it fits just inside that string. Now we're just going to mix up our 5-minute epoxy really good. This is, like I say, the 5-minute, so it'll set up for us fairly quickly. It also creates a hard mount between the firewall and the foam, and if there is anything variance right there, the epoxy will fill it in, as opposed to stuff like goop or other stuff which might be a little bit rubbery, a little bit spongy. So anyway, and as with any epoxy, always take a little bit of time and mix it up real thoroughly. Okay, now that we've got the epoxy mixed up, we're very simply just going to put it back on this one here. I think what we'll do is we'll just put it on the wing, because we don't want to get it all over the firewall. And just enough to kind of get to cover it real well. I mean, you want a pretty good layer there. You don't want to overdo it, but you want a pretty good layer there. Now, put a little bit also on where this pointer is, where it's machined in. It shouldn't be machined all the way through. If it has to be machined all the way through, put a little bit of CA back there and cover up that hole, because what you don't want is glue get in that center hole, because you want to be able to take out the that dowel once it's hard. So now we got the wing all epoxied up. It's out of the way. Now, very simply, all we're going to do is we're going to set it in here. Now, if you don't have clamps, you don't necessarily need clamps. All you have to do is just hold it with your hands and just line up that dowel until the epoxy sets off. And I also forgot to mention you can take these elevons and tape them up out of the way. With that goop hinge, it works just fine. But since we have some clamps, we're going to use clamps. Again, you can do this with just your hands, but if you got tools, use them. And so don't forget to make sure that the firewall is lined up. Oops, got this now just a tad. There we go. If you happen to use clamps, you may just need to adjust the pressure a little bit to get it lined up. Okay, so that's what we're looking for, is to have that dowel pointing straight at that dot. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to let this epoxy set up and harden. You'll find a couple of dowels in the bag, which are 1 1/4 inch long. These are going to go in those outside holes in the firewall. What we're going to do is we're going to take a 1/8 inch drill bit, which is the size of those holes, and I'm going to drill in the holes. Always make it as straight as possible. It should go in plenty deep for the dowels. And once the holes are drilled, make sure the dowels fit in the holes. Kind of stuck. Don't push them all the way in. You may not be able to get them out yet. As long as they go through the firewall, you should be good to go. Now to glue these in, we're going to use Gorilla Glue. I've got the white Gorilla Glue, which I kind of like because it dries a little quicker. The regular stuff will work just fine, but make sure you're using the polyurethane Gorilla Glue. And we're going to push that in these holes there, because when it goes in there, when that stuff dries, it expands out. That's kind of what we want, to make that really solid inside there. So we're just going to take our Gorilla Glue. Make sure to force plenty of it in there. Because you want it to go down inside the hole and fill up the hole as best as you can. There we go. Block the firewall off. That's what I don't like about this glue. This glue is just messy. Now, taking our dowels, we're going to take a little bit of water, because that water makes that stuff expand out. We're going to wet our dowel, and then we're just going to simply push the dowel in there. So it goes down and flush. Now we'll do the other one. And just make sure they're flush with the firewall, so you don't want them out. And that's done. Just let those dry. That foam will expand out inside there and make for a really solid joint for that firewall. Camera off.